Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And it's been a long time coming. I've had a chance to speak to two old compadres several times, guys that were on the bandstand long before I was ever born, a guy named Alan Schwartzberg and a guy named Bob Mann. And Alan kept talking to me. He's like, we grew up in Queens, and there was a third amigo to the group, and he's our best friend and such a great drummer. And so it's taken a while, but the trifecta is now in full union. And what an honor. Drummer Steve Schaeffer, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Happy to be here, Jake.
Can you talk about, I remember I was transcribing an interview with a kind of a mercurial organ player, Stu Gardner, who wound up being Bill Cosby's musical director. And he was playing a lot in Redwood City, and he said that, this is before he got famous, so to speak, and he was talking about a drummer that he used to play with, and the drummer wasn't the best player in the world by any means. He obviously wasn't a poor player, but, he didn't have the best chops in the world. But there was such a calming influence about this person, the way he smiled, his body language, and the way he listened, that it was more important for the band to have somebody like that because it felt good. And I wanted to know if there was somebody that you used to dig on or check out. And I'm not talking about, Blakey or Philly Joe or those cats. I know you guys were marinating in that, but it seemed to me that feel was the most important thing when you were coming up, even before you really started professionally. And I was wondering if there was somebody out there that you always used to say, man, it's totally unorthodox, but it works.
Well, I was lucky. I grew up in New York City, so it was different because the level of the drummers that were there that I was listening to, they set the standard for everybody, even the ones that weren't as famous as Philly Joe or Elvin or Roy Haynes. There was a whole other group of drummers like Louis Hayes, and I wrote a thing about Jimmy Cobb, who came after Philly Joe and played on some iconic records, but never got the acclaim that Elvin or Philly Joe or Roy Haynes had during the time, even though he was a direct descendant of those guys.
Yeah, it's true. He even Tony Williams after him gets much more publicity, but Jimmy he was such a, he came from the hood, and he was the most devoted.
He came from Washington.
Right, well, yeah, no, he came from the ghettos of Washington, D.C., and he was playing at, converted grocery stores, and Billy Hart was a little boy coming to see him. Even to this day, or, before he passed, when Jimmy would see Billy, he'd say, how you doing, man? And Billy's just like, I'm trying to sound like you, man. But he was an amazing field drummer, that's I just talked to Reggie Workman this week, not in an interview, and then I interviewed Jimmy Owens yesterday, and they both talked about this concert they did with Jimmy last fall, and, they could tell he was not in the best health and that he was slipping, but Schaeffer, it still felt so good. And that's the key. That's the whole key to jazz. It has to feel, has to touch your heart. Was there a time when you just viscerally remember walking out and being like, it doesn't have to be some, unorthodox drummer. Just what was the time that you got hooked into it and was like, you left a club and you're like, this is what at least before the studio scene, you were just like, this is my purpose, this is my path?
Well, that was my dream ever since I was like 13. So my path was different than Bob and Alan's because, well, Bob and I had the same piano teacher. We were put together by a piano teacher, Philip Ragusa, and he was Bob's piano teacher, and Bob's father was a great pianist, Simon, and I was studying with him, and he told my mother that he had another student that didn't want to play the piano, and that we should get these two guys together. He wanted to play guitar, and I wanted to play the drums. So Bob and I met. I was about 12, and
Wow.
we were best friends. He's I've had him as my longest friend, and we still speak every week. But we grew up together. Alan came after actually that, and some others. But yeah, so that was back then. I had some jazz records. My aunt had introduced me to them, and I played with them in my basement, and I got to love all of these players. I didn't know them except from the records, and then I wrote a thing on Facebook that when I went, it was 1958, my friend's father took my friend and myself to the Apollo Theater to see Miles Davis's quintet. I was looking forward to seeing Philly Joe because that's the guy I idolized.
Yeah, right.
And the opening act was the Red Garland Trio with Philly Joe Jones, and then the band came on, the regular band, Miles Band, which had John Coltrane from the previous band, but John was in this newer band, Bill Evans on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Jimmy Cobb. And so I got to hear him play that. I didn't know, and then I started listening to those records. And then, of course, the following year is when they released Kind of Blue. But there were two records that released before that. And I spent every cent that I had from either, birthday money or delivering newspapers or whatever I was doing to buying records. And
was one of those records? One of those records was Move.
No, I knew that.
Yeah, no, don't listen. The point is that I mean, if you can just
the first record I got, there was a 17-year-old drummer named Louis Hayes. He was on a Sonny Clark record, and I loved the way he played.
Jesus, that is so insane. I didn't know he ever played with Sonny Clark, man. I've interviewed Louis. God.
But it's just interesting to and then I had these other records, and so I had with Max Roach playing with Bud Powell and with Charlie Mingus, and so I got exposed to all of that, and then I could go into New York. My parents let me go in during the daytime. I would go into New York City, and with a friend usually, and I'd go to the drum stores, and then I would walk by. If the Metropole, they always had performances during the day, I would stand by the door and listen to all these they usually had more Dixieland type players. And I met Zudi Singleton, who was Louis Armstrong's drummer. Very famous drummer. Man. And he would see me there, and when he came out on a break, he was really kind, and he told the doorman, he said to let me stay there, not to chase me away, because they would have people that would stand there. He let me stay, and then he would talk to me on the breaks. I had the Louis Armstrong Hot 5 records that had Baby Dodds and Zudi Singleton on those Hot 5, Hot 7 records, so I got to meet this guy, and he was nice, and I watched him play. It wasn't the style that I wanted to play, but it was great, regardless, and I got to appreciate that, and then that came in handy to me in my career, when people would say, we got to play something from the 20s. And I see these guys like George Wetling and Judy Singleton playing live, and got to understand what it was that they were doing. So
this is what I wanted. This is the major. This is an important question. Going back to the Apollo, you go to any live music today. Obviously, it can vary, but a lot of my generation, I'm 42, so as a Gen Xer and younger, a lot of my generation has a tendency to feel an impetus to pulverize the audience at the decibel level of 10 and keep it there all night. The magic of the period of time that you were coming up in was that there weren't incredible PA systems or sound systems the way they are today. So dynamically, can you just talk about the vibe of Red Garland and Miles's band and how different or what?
I never heard him. I only heard him on record, but I did see him in person playing with his trio as an opening act for Miles.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is the idea of do you believe at that time that dynamics were sinking in for you because of
absolutely. Because we had to play. We had to be able to play with a lot of intensity, very softly, which is harder than playing loud. It was you had to play if you played with a trio. And I would go and see all these people play, even at a very young age. I was able to go. They had a peanut gallery at Birdland, so I could go and sit in the peanut gallery. I forgot what it cost me to do that, but then I would go with a friend, and then we would take buses and trains home. But it was amazing. I got to see all the people that I ever wanted to see, and playing dynamically, playing soft, being able to play very soft, but with intensity was hard to do. But you practice that stuff, and people tell you to, they shush you if you're playing, and it wasn't something I had to learn. It was harder for me to play. When the PA systems changed, forget it. There would be a wall of amplifiers.
Exactly.
Brutal for people's ears. And I was on bands that I did play with Dreams for a short bit.
No, you didn't.
And
I'm kidding. That is so great.
The opening act for one of my first concerts was the Mahavishnu Orchestra, with John McLaughlin, the original one with Rick Laird and Jan Hammer and Jerry Goodman and Billy Cobham, and they had, it looked like refrigerators lined up around the stage, and then we had to play. I felt like I was in the bottom of a swimming pool with a little set of drums. It was just not.
Well, wait, hold on. I just want to go back for a second. This is so interesting. A couple things. What was the first gig or one of the gigs you had early on? You can shed all you want about playing intensely but playing softly, but were you working that out on the bandstand? And what did you mean by people shushing you? Because I think that the problem with loud rock, loud sound systems is that the drums inevitably had to get louder. They couldn't play with that soft intensity. You lost all the dynamic range. It's a big problem in popular music today, aside from the drum machine and other things like that. So, did you find yourself? Even if before profession level, were you and Bob in a drummer? Not drummerless, like a trio working on that soft intensity.
Well, we played gigs, and I played gigs in high school. Marty Morell borrowed my vibraphone, and he was the vibe player.
Oh my God, Marty Morell! Are you kidding me?
Yeah, the three of us. Well, Alan went to the same high school, but he had graduated a few years before us, and I was a year behind Bob. So we played jobs. But then I went to the Catskill Mountains when I was 15. In fact, this guy sent me pictures. He became a dentist. There were a couple of bands in Queens. One, Al Cooper had a band called the Aristocats, and I subbed in that band. And then there was a band called the Valentines with the pianist his name is Bob Henner, and we played at a place in Cahonkson, New York, called the Nate and Sadie's Brookside Inn, and I had to play shows. I was 15, and so and then we would go and walk. We didn't have cars. We weren't old enough to drive. We would walk for miles to some other place where they had like jazz. Guys would get together and jam and stuff like that. And I met, not that year, but later on, Eddie Daniels. I got to play with him.
Wow.
And Dave Lieberman used to come to this hotel, the Homewack, to sit in with the band that I was playing with, after hours and stuff like that. It was insane.
Wait, I just want to be clear. I'm a Stony Brook cat, but I'm not. What was the place you used to go to play in what part of New York to play shows?
Oh, in Catskill Mountain.
So you go to the So you're telling me you'd go, and then
summers.
I mean, because I've interviewed Randy Weston, and those guys used to perform in up in the Catskills. Ola Tunji was up there, so you'd walk miles to go see cats playing jazz after.
Well, more like Latin bands. There were Latin bands that I saw, and then there was a place called it was a bar in, I don't know if it was Fallsburg, New York, but that's where the jazz guys would get together. And then I played at a place called the Homewack Lodge, and the guys would come to play with the band there. And some of the players that were in the bands that I played with, the trumpet players, well, Marty Morell had been in one of the bands, and he and the trumpet player, Alan Rubin, they went on the road with Robert Goulet. That's before Marty got the gig with Bill Evans, and then I took his place, and there was Louis Solop became the trumpet player there.
Wow!
Wow! It was like all these guys from the Blood, Sweat, and Tears bands, and we used to drive up in a car. We played with Dick Halligan, who was the writer, trombone player in Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Fred
Lipsius, yeah, absolutely. The original guys, the original Blood, Sweat, and Tears, yeah.
And the original guys, yeah. And so we kind of grew up with those guys.
I mean, Steve Schaeffer's blowing my mind. I've been shedding it's been a long time coming. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to pay attention to the voice, but also the content, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
Well, actually, when I first heard Take Five, that was when I became aware of Dave Brubeck. And I was already, this is my own experience, I was already way into Art Blakey and all of these other guys. So it was hard for me to appreciate even Joe Morello. And when I appreciated him later when I found out how great he was, but it didn't knock me out the way the band swung like the other records I was listening to at the time. So I didn't become a follower or a fan, and I didn't pay much attention to it, even though it got really big. Now, Vince Guaraldi, I heard Cast Your Fate to the Wind, and I liked it because Vince could play the blues. I could hear that. And I think Colin Bailey may have been the drummer on the record. I'm not sure, but it swung and I dug it. And that's all I knew about Vince. I was doing a lot of dates up and down California, Nevada as a young man, even in high school, and I'd occasionally open for Vince, and he had Bo Lissetti, a guitar player, and they'd play some type of bossa nova.
Oh my! You were on those? Were you on those? You were playing with those guys?
No, I played with Bo Lissetti a couple of times later, but I was playing opposite them, like I'd be in another band that would open for them.
Oh, that is so class! What a great scene! Yeah, I've heard those records before. I didn't think you were on. Mr. Schaeffer, you want to take a guess at who that is?
No.
Yeah, no, that was your generation, Mike Clark, the drummer Mike Clark. That was my interview with him from September
Sure.
2000.
I don't know Mike personally, but I did see his last webcast that I joined.
Yeah, well, no, and the reason I played that clip is because I asked him about, there was this such a dynamic, like we've been talking about, just a huge range of music with going from big band and sort of arrangements to sort of opening it up to individual improvisation and smaller quintets and quartets. Bebop came in at that time. And, I wanted to ask, Alan told me, and Mike has sort of said the same thing. He wasn't even hip to Brubeck. Later he loved Morello. He discovered how brilliant Morello was, but he was getting off on Blakey and Roach and, these incredible black drummers that were just swinging so hard. And even Alan told me, he goes, he said, you can't tell me you could find one white drummer that could play like any of the masters. And I'm not making this a color skin issue, but I just wanted to ask you, were you fully ensconced? It was pretty striking to me. Obviously, we didn't have the internet. But, Mike wasn't even hip to Take Five. He was just ensconced.
No, I had Dave Brubeck's record. I also had a record that Gary Burton's first record that Joe Morello played on. I think he discovered him or something, but there were a couple of, I'm pretty much of a jazz historian about this stuff, and one of the records that I listened to when I was younger in Queens, and Marty Morell listened to also, was a series of records of Shelly Manne, and he won all the polls in a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
He was the poll winner, and he played in that style of. He was a very creative, original, genius drummer who could swing his ass off and also have stylistically play in such a creative way. And he made a couple of records. One was Rhythm and Motion, and then later he made a record with My Fair Lady. Even though he had played, I had the original record with Andre Previn, but he had a band thing he put together with John Williams. It was Johnny Williams' band, and they did a whole series of My Fair Lady with all these transitions and things that only a guy like he and Larry Bunker they were mentors of mine.
I cannot believe you. You could not have. I'm so glad. First of all, Joe Morello. I listened to some of Morello's solo stuff that he did on Ovation Records that came out of Chicago, and it's just it's filthy. It's ridiculous, and I'm just Shelly Manne. I'm so glad I had a chance to interview Flip. Keltner gave me Flip's number a couple months ago.
Right.
And he was raised by the black musicians. They taught him to steer clear of the junk. Coleman Hawkins and those guys. Flip was a dancer, Rockette. You know this. Shelly.
Yes, I know.
And it's just so insane. Shelly used to get, because I'm sure we'll get into this, but obviously Shelly's Manhole. He had a band around the time that you probably moved out to California. Was Mike Wofford, Johnny Morell.
I played with that band.
No, so I just want to finish this thought, and then I want you to, because I need to hear about this, because it was John Gross, Morell, Jeffrey Castleman, the sickest bass player ever. So they did this album called Mankind, and when I interviewed the late great Gary Barone, people would come up, or Gross even.
What do you mean late? Did Gary Barone die?
He passed away about a half a year ago.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Steve. Well, no, listen. I'll fill you. Don't just I mean, it's yeah. He left us. He said that the older cats used to say, "Why are you playing all that weird stuff, man? Why aren't you playing the real stuff, the bebop?" And because Shelley's band that you played in was what was so cool was that they'd have Miles would come in or Herbie's band would come in. They'd play one set, and then instead of having an intermission when people would just be talking or outside smoking a cigarette, Shelley's band would play. So they were so influenced by that insane, wild music that was going on that they put this album out called Mankind. And I mean, Schaeffer, it's like 72, and it's like and Shelley's playing his ass off, and he's loving throwing in like some rock feel, and he's just not playing straight bebop. He was iconic. And then Bunker was not just a jazz guy. I mean, he had a huge impact on guys like Jim Messina when Loggins and Messina got together. I mean, he was like a mentor. Milt Holland the same way. These guys were like gypsies, man. I just, to me, it just, is there a way to split, because of the aficionado aspect of Schaeffer, can you split this, like the time feel, if you buy into the idea that jazz is a combination of classical European harmonies and African rhythms? What was the difference in any nuance between a black drummer and a white drummer playing jazz?
Well, it depended on the drummer, but Shelley. Well, let's back up a hair.
Yeah.
Stan Levy was
yes.
Dizzy Gillespie discovered him in Philadelphia. All right, he played on the scene with Charlie Parker. Shelly Manne was on the scene on the original scene that was happening. Even though he got really famous when he went with Stan Kenton's band, but Stan Levy also went with Stan Kenton's band. He may have played before Shelley, I'm not sure, but there were drummers here that were giants. That Victor Feldman, as you know, was a great piano player, and Victor's introductory album when he came from England had Scott LaFaro on bass and Stan Levy on drums. You're
right, it was Levy. That's right. He's in that Canoe. I love that on Contemporary.
Right, yeah. But Shelley, he crossed the boundary lines for me. There was nothing about his playing that sounded, quote, white to me. He swung hard, yeah. And he was just part of the music, and it's difficult for me to I'm not one to like categorize drummers as being he sounds white or he sounds black or something like that, because there are black drummers that I would categorize as sounding white.
No, I didn't listen. This is just more like, that
I grew up emulating, with the exception of a couple of musicians like Shelly Manne. They were all African American and played in a certain style that touched me, and that's what I emulated. That's what I tried to emulate. Things happen, in one's career later. I mean, I never intended on becoming a studio musician. I didn't like studio musicians in New York, because when I would go hear my favorite drummers, they were certainly not studio musicians in New York. Those guys didn't reach me that way. Although there were a couple of great drummers that played some shows, the main drummers that I loved were, Billy Joe, Jimmy Cobb, Louis Hayes, Art Blakey, yeah. Kenny Clark. I didn't like, I love Max Roach and his solos, but as far as feel for actually time feel, those guys, Pete LaRocca, I love Pete LaRocca's playing. not very well known. Died too young.
Dude,
But
lawyer, drove a cab, dropped out of music.
I know, but if you know, he was wanted to play his own music. I was told that Miles wanted him in his band. I was told that he recorded with John Coltrane with Steve Kuhn on some record that I have. And but he wanted to play his own music. He was his own guy, and he was a great Latin player. His real name was Peter Sims, but he was. I heard him play timbales at Birdland one time with a Latin jazz band, and I remember Philly Joe coming in and grabbing him, lifting him up, and hugging him. That's how good he was.
That is such a classic story. I mean, the Brill bill, like what you had. When did you join the union?
I lied about my age.
Right, that's good.
Joined
good.
15. I think I was about 15.
And you had a taste. You had a taste of the Brill building, or this. Can you talk about your first time in the studios? Like, what was this? What was the session?
The session. Boy, the studio is skipping. I had it on the tip of my tongue, but I did a session for a guy named Charlie Fox. I think it was a jingle,
yeah.
who became a good friend of mine, a really great writer and composer. And I'm trying to think of the studio. And when it comes to me, I will let you know.
Sure, don't worry about it. Yeah.
But anyway, and then I did a record date when I was still in school with Peter Duchin, his band, at Fine Sound.
Wow!
That was I played in a society band to pay for my school. I went to Manhattan School of Music, so I was playing at night and going to school during the day, and it was hard for me to do that. But I had earlier I was in the training band for Marshall Brown's Newport Youth Band, which was a tri-state band, and that band the regular drummer was John Forte, or Forte, Forte, and Eddie Gomez, who was 14 then, he was the bass player. And Micah Benny was the piano player, and Ronnie Cuba was the baritone player.
Holy cow!
It was a band that was made up of musicians in there. Once you got to 18, you were out of the band. My friend Alan Rubin was already out. They had Harry Hall and Nat Pavone were in the band. They became the trumpet section for Maynard Ferguson, 14 years old. And then things went on from then. When I was about 17, 17 and a half, I got the job with Al Cohen and Zoot Sims as the house drummer at the Half Note. And so my education, Al Cohen sent me to his teacher. As a teacher, Hall Overton was the head of composition at Juilliard. He became my teacher, was teaching me piano and theory. So I learned more from him than I did at Manhattan School of Music, I can tell you that.
What was can we get a year on the album, the Duchin album? I mean, this is important. You were 15. Because
a thing appeared when I saw Jimmy. You mentioned Jimmy Owens.
Yeah.
A video from a Boston news organization surfaced on Facebook that had 8 trumpet players playing at the Newport Jazz Festival. I had looked for this tape. I had called George Ween's office, who never filmed any of the Newport Jazz Festivals. Can you imagine the library he would have had from that? Anyway, disappeared. So it was the trumpet players were Dizzy Gillespie, Howard McGee, Kenny Dorham, Thad Jones, Clark Terry, Bobby Hackett, Ruby Braff, and Jimmy Owens. Those were the 8 trumpet players. The rhythm section was Billy Taylor, Kenny Burrell on guitar, Gene Taylor, from the Horace Silver bass player, and myself on drums. And there's there's a one tune that's at least, 12, 13 minutes long. When that came out, I contacted Jimmy Owens and got him I sent him the copy of that. And then it was posted in a lot of other stuff that came out. That was 1965, I believe.
You got an analog cassette or recording of it, audio?
No, it's on Facebook. It's on YouTube.
So somebody, even though it wasn't professional, it was a video.
It was a video from a news station.
Oh my God! You tracked it down. So. Did they get?
Yeah, well, a guy from England, a composer from England, John Altman, called me and said, "Is that you, Steve?" It might have been before. It said 1960. I think it's 65 Newport Jazz Festival. But in any event, finally, after 50 years, I got to see what I've been looking for, because people say, you didn't play with Dizzy. Like people say, they sit in a club or something. You didn't get, you played with Dizzy Gillespie? No way. I would go, no, I actually did, guys. I did, but nobody would believe me. So, and then when I read the Downbeat review of it, I was heartbroken because it said Sid Schaeffer on drums.
Sid Schaeffer. Sid, and they did that. Alan got called for that Walter Bishop session on Black Jazz, and it wound up Alan Schwartzbanger on it. It was just, having a ball here with Steve Schaeffer. We've got another name that voice. You're not going to know who the voice is, but pay attention to the content, and we'll come back.
When it started to get, like, say for instance, Stax Records with with backing, all that R&B-ish type stuff, and say the Booker T, the instrumentals, how they use electric bass, and that was like the beginning, sort of. But that was a little later '60s. It wasn't late '60s. It was like early '60s. But I don't know if you know this, but the really first electric bass rock and roll record was an Elvis record.
Really? Really?
Yeah, it's called Jailhouse Rock. You know the song Jailhouse Rock?
Oh yeah, big time.
Well, before that he was using an upright bass on his early records, and then of course they used electric. But the first real rock and roll beat was an electric bass playing against an eighth note rock and roll beat with a quarter note bass line.
Oh, I love this.
So if you listen closely to that record, you'll hear, when it goes into the 4 chord, you'll hear, and then you hear the bass playing dong dong, a walking bass against it. So that was really the first rock and roll record with an electric bass playing a rock and roll beat, but still playing a straight ahead quarter note boogie woogie line.
Do we know who was playing on that album?
I'm not sure the bass player on that. I think that was Bill Black, actually.
Black?
He played electric. No, maybe not on that record, but it's possible that he did play on that record. But yeah, but that was the change right there. I don't know if you realize.
Well, no, that was. Steve, that was being that you've been all around this world. That was the bass player from Canned Heat and Harvey Mandel's band, and played a lot with Paul Lagos, and it was Larry Taylor, bass player.
don't know him, but I
And
like what he had to say.
yeah, and I wanted you just stepping back and talking about the transition. If it made it harder to swing in a jazz setting when things moved from the upright to the electric bass. Also, do you know? Quick question for Steve Schaeffer, legendary drummer and connoisseur. Do you know the first cat to play an electric bass on a jazz record?
First electric bass on a jazz record.
Yes.
I have to guess at this one, right?
Well, I'm gonna. I mean, yeah, you're gonna have to. I know the answer, but I thought maybe you would know it. You know.
Well.
Oh, and here's the thing. There's two parts. Who was it, and then what record? I can help you with the record, but who do you think it was?
Well, I'm trying to think of the first electric bass. Man, I remember. I'm not sure. I know that some of the guys started doubling on electric bass, but
yeah, not the electric bass guitar, but the actual electric bass. First cat to do it, Monk Montgomery, 1953.
Oh yeah,
Art Farmer record.
Well, he play with the brothers. He played electric bass with Buddy Montgomery and Wes. The three of them had a trio.
Sure, but I mean this was 53. Art Farmer, first time electric bass was used on an album. But I remember like they started. I wonder if you could talk as eloquently as you could. I mean, like you said, you never planned on being a studio musician. The best things in life happen when you're not even paying attention. But I mean, can you talk a little bit about the ability to swing and how things changed from when you went from really acoustic improvisational music to plugged in instrumental improvisational music?
Well, I was part of the electronic. I had my own mantra was that a lot of synthesizer players were replacing live rhythm section players at a certain time.
Absolutely.
In the late 70s, and I said, well, if somebody's going to replace me, it's going to be me. So I marched myself down to meet Roger Lynn, who had the drum machine that everybody was using on all their stuff. Mostly it was keyboard players.
Yeah.
And I remember they had a pin with a picture of a drum set with a red circle and a line through it, And I went into his office. I think he might have been taken back because I think he knew who I was, because Steve Porcaro and I told him that I wanted to use it because I felt that I could program the drum part better than a keyboard player. That it would sound more realistic.
Absolutely.
And so I bought a machine, and then I got a tech from Chicago, his name was Vince Gutman. He worked with Bruce Springsteen's band, Max Weinberg, and people like that. And he lives in Woodstock, and we had some triggers installed into the Lynn machine that I could take a pad and I could play. I could play like it would be next to my hi-hat, and I could play like a kabasa part. But I could use the sounds that were on the records, and I could play the drums and some percussion. And I told my friends that they needed to get this machine, and I kind of felt like I had helped bring back some of the drummers to being able to work, because basically it was all synth stuff, and live rhythm sections were out. They didn't want to hear that. So I became very involved in that scene for a number of years. And
yeah, no, I'm talking more about I think you're talking about, the late 70s, 80s. I mean, I'm talking more like we let in with the nastiest album I've ever heard in my life. And I don't know how many copies of it you have, but that was Joanne Grauer, Frogchild, Schaeffer, and Ray Neapolitan on Fire in '74. And Ray was an upright player with Larry Novak in Chicago, but in that context, he was playing electric. And I just what I was more interested in was like you go from literally dropping a couple of mics into a room to record to at that point when you're playing more, I don't know, she was an amazing pianist but also a vocalist. Did you put up baffles at that point? I mean, what sonically, how did things change? Not the Linn drum machine, not automatic rhythm. I mean, just like how did it change when you were playing with Peeps?
Well, I mean, the sounds on records had changed because certain drummers they played with actual covers on their drums. Hal Blaine, who was making all these hit records, and he had they looked like short covers that fit over the top of the head. They were actual, fit over each size of each drum, and he'd play on top of those things. I mean, it sounded like cardboard, but that became the sound, of certain kinds of hit records. And it wasn't the Motown sound. And there were also, but he played here with the, with the guys that were here. He made all those records with
Amel and Tedesco and those cats.
Yeah, and who was the producer that went to jail for murder?
Oh dear. Spector.
Bill Spector, right?
Can you point out a couple of hit tunes where it sounded thuddy, cardboardish kind of thing?
No, I didn't. No, I can't.
Okay.
No, but I mean, I know the drums because I would see them.
Okay.
I would actually be able to touch them,
touch the drums, yeah.
But he had these fiberglass shells that were made by a company called Blamire. I don't know if they're still in business, but they were a set of like tuned toms. They started making things like octobans and these other things but it would have an entire thing on a stand that would surround him with I don't know how many tom-toms, 10 tom-toms, and they started making drum sets like that, single-headed, by the way, and everything evolves and changes with time. But the second version of them, it was called the TJB in 1975, and I needed to I had like Pearl drums at that time, and then I switched to Yamaha drums in 1976, but they had like a set where I had a number of tom-toms. There's a couple of videos out there where I played with, it was Herb Alpert and the TJB, and we made a few records. And so it was that kind of a sound. They wanted that sound. It was Hal Blaine had played on the original records.
Okay, so they in order to get that sound, did you have to put covers over it?
I didn't put covers on.
You didn't.
I didn't put covers on, but I had single-headed with with a black dot in the middle of it. They were pretty dead.
It's just I want to be clear. I mean, this is something we can work on together, but like this TJB 75, it's listed as you're a drummer on it. Paisano's on it, Bob Edmondson, but then it says Nick Ceroli.
Nick Ceroli was the drummer. He left in 75 to join the Merv Griffin show.
Dude, I love Nick. So then you took. I mean, Nick, man, that dude was such a sick drummer. Then you took over his spot there.
Yeah, I had to go on the road with them. I listened to the show, saw the show, what was going on. It was a show, I mean, it was a featured. It wasn't like you were backing up an act, that you were the act. And so, they scheduled auditions, and I went there, and I tell the story. So the story is that, there was, 70 drummers scheduled to audition, and I was number one, and I was really upset about it because I said, how is he going to know what anybody sounds like when he gets to 40, So I came in, they had a little room set up, and there was a drum set, and I don't remember if I brought stuff or I just played on what was there, and I played, and then he canceled the rest of the auditions, and that was it. I was in the band. But I had gone on then I went on, they were doing one tour of some kind, and I went to a couple of venues with them. And I was friends with Nick already. I used to sub for him on a couple of big bands here. I really couldn't get arrested in L.A. I'd been here for a number of years. And then after I joined Herb Alpert, there was a plane incident on one of the only tours we did. We went to England and some of Europe, but we were on a tour of Canada, and they were, during that year, French Canadians were trying to secede from British Canada, and so they blew up post offices, and nobody ever got hurt, but they did it at night and stuff like that. And there was a bomb scare on a plane we were on Air Canada, which was a government-owned airline, and we had to go down chutes and run away from the plane and do all that kind of stuff. And
my God, that's harrowing.
Herb was just married to Lonnie Hall.
Yeah.
He said, "That's it. I don't want to deal with this anymore." So that was the end of the TJB.
that was the end of it forever, or I mean, like it never came.
The end of it forever. And then I got called by him that he was working on a record, and he was auditioning rhythm sections. So Abe Laboriel and myself went to A&M Records, and because I was making some dance records at that time, disco type records.
Sure.
And I had a good reputation. I had played on a Brothers Johnson record and some other stuff, and so Abe and I auditioned, and we became the rhythm section for the record Rise, which was a hugely sampled record, and probably Herb's biggest hit. And even more than the Tijuana Brass, but that became kind of an iconic record. If people wanted to sound like that, they called it.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because the guy Mike Clark, who we heard from before, he remembers mid-70s after the Headhunters. He'd be in the studio, and producers would say, just play straight beats. Just play the beats that the last radio hit. We just want to get that straight beat. Don't play yourself. Don't be yourself. Just play straight beats. So when you talk about people trying to capture a sound, do you feel like, yes, inherently you were brought in, you got to sing for your supper, you weren't anonymous anymore, you could get arrested in L.A., but you were playing to match some kind of sound based on a hit record? And to me, it's humbling, because it's the idea of saying, we can create a formula to create a hit. And most people would say, if you're trying to make a hit, you're never going to make a hit. But we've gotten so formulaic now, and it's so automated in terms of lack of humanity within rhythm, or just within music in general. I just wonder, looking back on it at that time when they would call you guys for that sound, if you just felt like you were like, okay, I'm here to play this part, but I really can't play. I can't be Steve Schaeffer.
Well, I mean, the best of these stories, it really goes back to Shelly Manne, who played on the record Fever with Peggy Lee. It was just drums, and the bass player was Joe Mondragon. So it was Shelly Manne, Joe Mondragon, and Peggy Lee. That's
oh my God!
It for the record. Now, if you listen to the record, you'll hear it, and he's playing with his fingers and everything. So he gets called, the Universal, and they want it to sound like Fever. They want to do a song like, or they want to do a takeoff on Fever. So they're doing it. Shelly's playing drums, and they say, "Drummer, can you come in the booth? This is a true story. I've been told it's a true story, and I believe it."
Yes.
And they said, "Listen, can you just listen to this?" And of course, they put on the record Fever with Peggy Lee, and they say, "Can you, any way that you can, we need it to sound like Shelly Manne?" And he says, "I am Shelly Manne." And that's the way that went. So it's always done that way. People want things to sound like something that they have in their head, and if what they have in their head, it's no different than scoring a movie where they dub music in, and then the actual music is the very last thing that goes in, because all the cuts are made, and then they put the music on it. So if somebody's been living with some classical music or some rock music or some jazz music in a movie for a year, and they look at the scene, they're going to want to hear that kind of a thing. It happens all the time for writers, where they're literally pulling the hair out of their head because they're told that they wanted to sound like the dub, and so they're working around things like that. But I can tell you, having played on, I don't even want to tell you how many, 30,000 recordings maybe of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that this stuff happens, and all the time, where they wanted to emulate something.
But I want to go back. Being that you were ensconced in this period of vitality in music, I know Shelly Manne came from the school of never playing the same song the same way once, and that's the point. Is that
was his line? That was his famous line.
Exactly, and that's the point. And that's what drives me insane. Is that, I mean, I understand that.
But when you're on a session and
Yeah.
he's a sideman, he was asked to. It's different when he's playing music from his heart, but when he's hired at a certain point, he called me and told me I wasn't doing much, and this is after Tijuana Brass went down. I was on the road, I went on the road, and then I was in New York at the Bottom Line playing with a singer named Michael Franks. Did you ever hear of him?
Are you what? Wait. You came back from L.A. in the late '70s. You were playing with Franks?
No, I came after Herb Alpert's band broke up. I went on the road with Michael Franks to New York and San Francisco and a couple of other places. And John Guerin had done the records, and I went on tour, and the band was a really good band. He had David Sanborn was playing saxophone in New York. We had a piano player named Milcho Leviev who's
Oh
died.
my God, dude, that's Phil. That's disgusting.
And we played the Bottom Line, and then while I was outside on a break, this drummer, Bobby Thomas, who was the drummer for the Billy Taylor Show, saw me, recognized me, and said to me, you helped me carry drums up to a dance rehearsal a number of times. If you saw me on the street, walk up 4 stories or 5 stories, and he said, I never forgot that. And we were friends. He was friends with Bob. They had been on the road together and stuff, Bob Mann, that is. And he said, I am the musical coordinator for all of chorus line shows. Oh. And they need they want a New York drummer that knows how to play it. So to go to California, stop in San Francisco, break in, and take the original cast. And so I went to L.A. as a drummer from New York, which I originally was, but like 7 years later. And now I'm in the pit at the Schubert Theater in L.A., and now I get discovered. Because why? Because who's the new guy? Who's the new guy from New York? So now I get discovered as a new guy from New York, as opposed to the guy that's subbing for Nick Ceroli and John Guerin, and now I get hired to play. That's how stuff happens, you know.
So I just want to be clear. You this was actually the guy from New York, but this was you had already been to California one time. This was your second time back out there.
I was living in California.
Exactly. So you weren't, and you couldn't get arrested at that time. But then when you got back out there, that's how it worked out.
That's how it worked out. 1976.
I'm not going to, this is, you know, and you know, you have been, I mean, this is one of the most amazing discographies, but I'm just not going to let you get away today without talking about, I mean, again, the late, great Gary Barone, I mean, my jaw dropped because,
so I'll tell you.
I just want to tell you this one story, and then you can riff off on it. He just said that in '68 they were at a California college that's now defunct. I'm going to look it up right now. But Ed Green was playing like Elvin Jones. I mean, Keltner. I mean, this was the most ever. I'm not surprised you couldn't get a hook out there, because those guys at a certain point recognized they were not going to starve to death playing $5 a week jazz gigs, so they went in the studio. But I really need you to talk to me about this special pocket of time. Steve Schaeffer, 71 through 73. There has to be some other recordings of you out there. The only thing we got on record is Joanne Grauer, Frogchild, 74.
No, there's other records. I played on Bobby Shue's record. It's one of his first records. I played on...
I'm talking when you first got it in 60, 70, 71.
Oh, I have to look at my...
well, because right now I'm looking at like Lanny Hall, Happy Woman, Happy Man. That was 74 on A&M. I'm and then... but I'm just trying to figure out, like, I mean, did you have to, I mean, because you couldn't get arrested out there, but I mean, you must have wound up doing some kind of work for, and I realized that Gary Malabar was out there, and, you know, so many cats were, Earl Palmer was still cooking, I guess. And, but do you, like, I mean, do you remember the first time you were in a studio in L.A.?
In L.A. Thinking.
Well, how about this? You think about that. You think about that. I got one more voice to play for you.
I sent you a thing about the instrumental Rise that I just copied and sent it to you.
Yeah, no, I'll dig on that later. There's one more voice, and I think you might know this cat, and so I want you to take a listen to it, and we'll come back.
Okay.
Idea of oneness, which is a spiritual thing of oneness, and you can put it into any religion you want, meaning the universe, the Godhead, Jesus, whatever people do to become one with the universe. That kind of thinking, right? That kind of stuff, I'm going to say, predates art, predates religion. So to get a grasp of it, the very first guy that expressed himself on a cave by doing paintings. I think it predated speech too.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly predated written speech. What I'm getting at is art. Is this expression of the divine or becoming one with something? So all of art is like that. From the very beginning in the history of man is going to tell you that art was there 40,000 years before man even spoke a word, let alone wrote it down. So to practice an instrument, you want to become a guitar player. Okay, so you buy a guitar. And then, well, you got to practice. Now, you have to practice. That's called meditation. People that meditate, they hear the bell, they see the light, they go into the oneness, they become one with all of that stuff. Musicians and artists have been doing this from the beginning of humans becoming humans. You buy the guitar, you practice every day. At a certain point, you and the guitar become one. Now, that doesn't mean physically, but when I, as a musician, I hear the guitar player playing, I don't hear the guitar and then this guy playing the guitar. The soul of that guy playing the guitar and the guitar become one. How does that happen? Well, the guy gets Carlos Santana, whether you like him or you don't like him, is one of those kind of guitar players. Angel Romero, a classical guitar player, right? Two opposite ends of the spectrum. Santana, and my friend Angel, who is a classical guitarist. You hear that guitar, you're hearing one. You don't know it's Carlos Santana. Yes, you know it's his style. You hear that. So this oneness happens in music all the time, and you look for it.
Mr. Schaeffer, who is that?
It's so familiar sounding, and I don't know.
I need you to. This is a person, a compadre of yours that you collaborated with a lot. I'm going to need you to offer a guess. He was not. He produced a lot of sessions you were on.
He produced. It can't be Phil Ramone.
No, it's soundtracks.
Oh, soundtrack.
Yes, that's the last clue I'm going to give you, Schaeffer. And I interviewed him in February 2016, and I pray he's still with us. I don't know. But I need you to, because you weren't going to get...
Was he a composer?
He sure was, yeah.
God.
The ethereal Bill Conti.
I was just actually...
I don't say you were just going to say it. You should have just said it then.
Well, Bill Conti, yes. I worked with Bill Conti for a long time at one point.
And, you know...
I did two of the Rocky movies.
Right. And in general, like, there's... I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the strangest, because the way a lot of soundtracks came out, you know, there'd be somebody doing push-ups and you'd have to do some sort of frenetic, you know, theme. The late great Emil Richards, a dear friend of mine, love him so much, and he said the hardest music to play was cartoon music. But do you have a memory of not necessarily the Conti, but just the most bizarre soundtrack recording you ever took part in? As far as like Levon Helm, you talked about Alan Rubin. I mean, Levon would be recording in his barn and just blasting the horn parts out of the speakers, and the rhythm section would play around that stuff. It was very I'm just saying unorthodox recording style, unorthodox. Just a soundtrack that you were on that was recorded and it sticks out in your mind.
Okay. One of the first. Let me see when that was. Out here. Well, let's see. I'll tell you in a second. In 1978, there were some stuff before that, because most of my career really hit in the 80s.
Yeah.
But Pat Williams did a score for a movie called Casey's Shadow, which trying to think of. Max Bennett was the bass player. I remember that, and
Rest in peace.
Larry Bunker, percussion, and Bruce Hornsby was playing piano.
Whoa.
And it was kind of an interesting score, and the drums are featured a lot. It was a good movie. It didn't really do that great, but most of the stuff I did was TV themes. I did a lot of TV themes.
Wait, what was the name of the film in '78, by the way?
KC's Shadow with Walter Matthau.
Oh my God, that is insane. I mean, did you? I'm throwing you all over the place right now, but I mean, were you? Did you get to play Shelley's Manhole? Did you get to? You got to play in that?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to tell you. So I was doing a rehearsal at the Musicians Union. Well, first of all, I came out here. I was in a band in 1967. Sarah Vaughan put a new trio together. Bob James had left, and the new trio was Chick Corea, myself, and Herb Mickman was the bass player.
Oh my God!
And we opened in San Francisco in 1967. And so
wait. You were at the Jazz Workshop or Basin Street? Where were you at?
We were at the
Black Hawk?
The hotel at the top of the Fairmont Hotel. They had a room there. She played those kind of rooms.
Right.
Here, we didn't do the small jazz club. She was bigger than that. And so we did play the Monterey Jazz Festival in '67. I remember Charles Lloyd was there with Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette and Ronnie McClure. And we played that. And then there are recordings of us on YouTube playing her show that was recorded with a mic in the piano that Chick had done. He was trying to record himself. And so that I played with her, so 67, 68, and part of 69, so 2.5 years. And Chick left after a year. He joined Miles Davis. And the band was never the same after he left. But, so, I didn't do a lot of recording. You know, I was working for her all year. She was one of the few jazz acts that paid a retainer, and I was thrilled to have the job. And I traveled all over with her, and she was an unbelievably great human being and a genius singer and musician, I have to tell you that. So Jimmy Cobb took my place in the band after I left, along with some other people.
Yeah, Carl Schroeder probably took over on piano.
Right.
Yeah,
Carl Schroeder. But in any event, so...
You went to a rehearsal at the Musicians Union.
Oh, yeah, rehearsal at the Musicians Union. Shelley Mann called, he says to me, "Hey, man, you sound really to play with my band." The band was Mike Wofford, Jeff Castleman, John Morell, John Gross, Gary Barone, and myself.
Wait, I'm sorry. This is so important. You cut out for a minute. Shelley said, "Hey, man, you sound great," and then what?
I would love for you to. Would you like to play a sub for me at my club with my band?
Oh my! This is making my.
And I thought he was like, "Are you kidding me?" And he said, "No, I'm not kidding you." And so I said yes, and I played with that band, the very band that you named. You heard all the names, right?
Dude, I cannot believe Schaeffer. I'm listening now. Again, Shelley's obviously on that record, but that music, man, that's keeping me between Wilton Felder and that record. It's keeping me sane right now. That was '72. That band was ridiculous. ridiculous.
John Morell lives 3 houses down from me, and we speak all the time.
Well, you let Morell is a big fan. I've done 2 interviews. I love, dude. His dad was such a badass, but John.
Well, and what about his son, Justin? Have you know anything?
Well, I'm still. He's been hipping me to his. I need to do an interview with his son. That was the last time we communicated, and I need to. But the Morell was playing like one of those like nasty. It was so modal and ridiculous. And those guys, the greatest thing about it is that you play live so much that, you go in the studio. I think Morell might have even been playing for free. I think he just would show up to keep his chops together. But, ultimately you'd go in and that's why live recording for so long sounded so visceral with so much urgency and energy, is because so many guys were playing live that they could come in and just have that sound, and it just burns away. And that album, Mankind, is a testament to that. There's a great story of that album because I guess Shelley had 3 days at RCA, or he had some recording studio, and he looked at all the guys that we've just been talking about, and he said, hey, all right, I got this studio booked for 3 days, so this first day we're just going to run through the tunes, and then we'll record on day 2 and 3. And everyone's like, okay, great. And so, everyone's relaxed, and they just burn through what probably the sets they were playing at the Manhole nightly, and they finished the first day, and Shelley's like, no, that's it, we're done. And they're like, what the fuck? They're like, John Gross, who's like a perfectionist, he's like, he was freaking out. He was like, Shelley, you can't do this. You said it was rehearsal. Shelley's like, we're done. And John told me in our interview, he goes, Shelley was right, man. He had us all so relaxed in that rehearsal that it came out. He knew exactly. It was just the Zen trickster mentality. This album is just, it's so beyond. It's so freaking, and it's, as much as great, all the Peggy Lee stuff and all the live at the Manhole and with Kamuka and all that stuff. This album, man, I can't believe you played in that band. That's just so.
I played with that. I played with that band, and I became good friends with Mike Wofford, and then because of my relationship, and my playing with him, I went on the road to sub for John Guerin with the Byrds.
No.
So weird.
No.
Going from one extreme to the other.
Schaeffer, Schaeffer. This is insane. Wait, hold on. Dude, John Guerin also was in my soul. He was the most, unorthodox. You want to talk about a badass. I can't even. Wait, the Byrds at that time, was it Gene Clark was in the band at that? Was Lee Sklar on?
No. It was just Roger McGuinn and the Byrds. It was just Roger McGuinn, and Mike Wofford played organ and keyboard, and I don't remember who the bass player was.
Oh, you got this is, wait, was it Sklar?
I'll find out. I can find out. I call Mike and find out.
Dude, because I've interviewed Wofford, Barone, rest in peace, Morell. I've done 2 interviews with. Castleman's hiding from me, but not for long. That dude was in the Duke Ellington Orchestra. What a badass. It was like, if I could have seen, if Shelley took a night off and I could have seen Schaeffer cook the groove with Castleman for a week, I'd be set for life, dude. That's unreal. That's defining stuff. You don't by chance have any recordings of you playing there?
No, but I have. Somebody sent me a CD of the stuff with Sarah Vaughan that I played with Chick, and
I need to hear that if possible. I don't know if you're releasing that or not. It's insane. I got to hear that.
Yeah, so I have some stuff of that, and we'll figure out how to do that.
Well, Steve, anyway, we're gonna do part 2. My final question in part 1 here. We've been cooking for 83 minutes. Can you just tell the story of the time that Philly Joe pawned your drums?
No, he didn't. Okay, so he told Alan that's not what happened. So I was.
Or he tried to. He tried to.
No, I'll I'll tell you exactly.
Go ahead.
I was in a rehearsal with Howard McGee's band. It was the band that I went up to the Newport Festival with in 1966, and Billy Joe showed up at the rehearsal, and I never really got to ever speak to the guy, you know, and he was my idol. So Howard said, "You don't mind if Joe sits in?" And I said, "Are you kidding? You know, how much do I have to pay him?" You know, so I sat down in a chair, literally 2 feet away from him, right next to him, you know, a little behind. And so they played a couple of tunes, and then he says, "Okay, that's it." And so he starts packing up my drums, and I said, "Hey, man," he said, I said, "You don't have to do that." And he said, "Get out of here, you know, get away." And I said, "Hey, I'm 6'2", you know, he wasn't that big, and even though I was young, I said, "Those are my drums."
Right.
And he held both of his hands up like, "Oh, okay." And he left. So I never got to talk to the guy. You know, he's my idol, trying to pack up my drums, you know. Not for a good reason. He never took them. But there was no way I'm letting him take my drums, because I worked my ass off to get those drums, and that was it. That was the story. He never took the drums, but he ruined my experience. But it didn't change my love for him, you know.
No, but I just want to be clear. Even though it's all speculation. If you felt like if you had sort of cowed and been bullied, he could have actually walked off with your drums.
Yeah, but that wasn't Jake.
It didn't.
You know,
No.
I'm a street guy from New York.
Schaeffer. It's all. Listen, this is we're playing out Monday morning quarterback. No. We're just playing out Monday morning quarterback here.
Billy Joe tried to rob his own bass player one time. I heard that he put a bandana on after a gig, and the bass player had double parked his car and went in to get some cigarettes or something. And when he came out to his car, Billy Joe had a gun. And the guy recognized that it was Philly Joe, and he said, "Joe, are you kidding me? This is so-and-so."
Put the gun away. No, I mean, Schaeffer, I got another. I'm up against it, man. I got a jam. We
go ahead.
Yeah, let's do part 2, man. It was so great to connect with you, man.
And Al Schwartzberg had called me while we were online there, so
of course he
I
did.
have to call him back.
Yeah, call him back, and you let Morel know he's my favorite guitar player of all time. That album with Mankind, I'll never stop listening to that album. Thank you, Steve.
I will call him in a couple of minutes.
Tell Morel I miss him. Tell him I miss him, man. I love that cat, man.
Okay.
Yeah, be cool, man. Yeah, be cool.
All right, you too.
Yeah, later on.
Bye-bye.
Bye. One down, one to go. We'll be back on the Jake Feinberg Show. Mm-hmm.